voice, he speaks about the record of the last government. That record was 14 years of failure. 6 years austerity, 3 years of Brexit logjam, then Johnson Trust and the Leader of the Opposition, utter failure. And this government was elected to do things differently, to make fairer choices, but most importantly to give Britain its future back. So we will fix the foundations, we'll do it with a long-term plan to grow our economy, protect working people and rebuild our country.
Leader of the Opposition, Rishi Sunak.
Can I join with the Prime Minister's words of tribute to Alex Salmond and the Holocaust survivor Lily Ebert, and thank him for his kind words about Sir David Amess. We remember him fondly and we will be thinking of all their families at this moment. Mr. Speaker, this week China has carried out unwarranted, aggressive and intimidatory military exercises in the Taiwan Strait. Our allies are rightly concerned. After worrying reports that the government may have intervened to stop a visit to the UK by the former Taiwanese president, can the Prime Minister confirm that the Foreign Secretary will use his meetings in Beijing this week to condemn China's dangerous escalatory acts in the Strait?
I thank him for his question. The continued military activity in the Strait is not conducive to peace and stability in the Taiwan Straits is in all of our interest. On the wider point that he raises, we will cooperate where we can as permanent members of the UN Security Council, issues like net zero, health and trade, compete where we have different interests, but challenge, the point he makes is absolutely right, where it's needed, to protect national security, human rights and our values, and we will put that challenge in.
Well, given what the Prime Minister said, and I agree, of course, we must engage, and we should use that engagement for our national interests. I hope that the Foreign Secretary will unequivocally condemn this military escalation and stand up for democracy in Taiwan. Now, the whole House will be concerned about the fate of the democracy campaigner Jimmy Lai. He is a British citizen who has been wrongly imprisoned in Hong Kong for 4 years. The previous government pressured China for his release. Does the Prime Minister agree that this is a politically motivated prosecution and that it is a breach of China's legal obligations to Hong Kong under the Sino-British Declaration?
Yes, and this case, as he will understand, is a priority for the government. We do call on the Hong Kong authorities to release immediately our British national, and the Foreign Secretary raised this case in his first meeting with China's Foreign Minister, and we will continue to do so.
Rishi Sunak.
I thank the Prime Minister for that answer. Now, China, as he knows, has become a decisive enabler of Russia's war against Ukraine, supplying the vast majority now of Russia's imported military microelectronics and components, worsening the suffering of the Ukrainian people. So can the Prime Minister confirm that he is prepared to sanction any Chinese business or individual involved in aiding Russia's invasion of Ukraine, including secondary sanctions on financial institutions?
Yes, and we've called for that in the past. We continue to do so, and I hope this is an issue where we can have unity across the House.
Yes, I can assure the Prime Minister of his support. It is something that we began. The United States recently have expanded their sanctions, and I hope that the new government will continue to look at doing the same. Now, the last government also established a new system of registration and monitoring to protect the UK from interference from foreign states, including China, Russia and Iran. Called the Foreign Influence Registration Scheme, it was described as essential by MI5 in the fight to help keep Britain safe. But since the Prime Minister took office, he has halted its implementation. Why?
That isn't correct.
Rishi Sunak.
Well, Mr. Speaker, that is very clearly what the government has said. And only last week he said at the dispatch box that he would give the security forces the powers they need. And if he is going to fulfil that promise, I would urge him to get up to speed on this issue and therefore implement the scheme. Furthermore, Parliament's Intelligence and Security Committee have warned that British universities are increasingly a rich feeding ground for China to exert political influence over us. That's why we passed the Freedom of Speech Act with new powers to help defend universities from this threat, but the new Education Secretary has since blocked it. So can the Prime Minister tell us how, without this tool, the government will prevent Chinese influence over our universities?
I really don't think party political points on security and intelligence. Honestly, throughout the last Parliament, we stood with the government on all questions of security and intelligence because it was important to the outside world that we did so. I worked with the security and intelligence services for 5 years prosecuting cases. I know firsthand the work that they do as a lawyer. I've known firsthand the work they do as the Prime Minister. We support them in everything that we do, and he knows that.
Rishi Sunak.
Mr. Speaker, whether it's the FIRS scheme or the Freedom of Speech Act, these were new tools, new sets of powers that the previous government passed in order to give, whether it's our universities or security services, the powers they need to tackle a growing threat. And we will, of course, continue to support the government in protecting our national security, but do believe on this side of the House that those tools are needed and are concerned by reports that the new government has paused their implementation or indeed scrapped them. But finally, Mr. Speaker, the Chinese government has sanctioned multiple members of our parliament for championing human rights. As a result, they have faced intimidation, abuse and surveillance. And Mr. Speaker, I commend you for your defence of the right of every member of this House to speak out on crucial issues without fear of retaliation from foreign states. Now, I know the Prime Minister will agree with that too. So this week, will the Foreign Secretary in his meetings not just raise the issue, but tell the Chinese government to lift those sanctions on our colleagues?
Yes, and we speak with one voice. He speaks about the record of the last government. That record was 14 years of failure. 6 years austerity, 3 years of Brexit logjam, then Johnson Trust and the Leader of the Opposition, utter failure. And this government was elected to do things differently, to make fairer choices, but most importantly, to give Britain its future back. So we will fix the foundations. We'll do it with a long-term plan to grow our economy, protect working people and rebuild our country.